Welcome to another flip video lesson with Mr. Volkman. Today's flip video lesson will be the finale of lesson 10.5. And in this flip video, we're going to talk about amendments 6 through 8, which are all about the rights of people who are accused of a crime. Let's begin, shall we? And as always, let's take a moment to actually read through what the Sixth Amendment, which is the first one we'll talk about, actually says. Please read with me. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. As always, this is an educational video, so please make sure you pause the video to add anything to your notes that you may have missed, or to rewatch certain parts of the video that you're confused by. Reading the Sixth Amendment, I'm sure you realize that there are a lot of rights that people who are accused of a criminal crime can have to ensure that they have a fair trial. So I'm going to do my best to break down everything that is in the Sixth Amendment. Now, the Sixth Amendment was designed to make criminal prosecutions more fair, accurate, and legitimate. And that's done through 5 different actions. Now, the federal government also has state courts use these 5 basic items as well. The first of the 5 is that people who are accused of a crime are allowed to have a speedy trial. And this is basically to keep memories fresh of people who are called on to testify in a criminal case. However, some court cases do take years to start, but it is the government's job to ensure that these cases do not take like 20 years and everyone forgets what they saw or what they heard. Next, trials need to be public. That way then government and people can't do something sneaky and diabolical and no one knows about it. So the courts can only be closed if there's national security issues about what people are saying, if the safety of the public could be at risk, and finally, if there are some serious concerns about the privacy of the defendant. The next thing that's part of the Sixth Amendment is that there needs to be witnesses shown. The defendant is allowed to hear what witnesses say against him or her. And they also are allowed to question these witnesses as well, because again, that's only fair for them to be able to do that, to try to prove that they are not guilty. The fourth part to make the Sixth Amendment, to give rights to those accused of a crime, is that they need to have an impartial jury. Remember, a jury is a group of people who hear the case and decide if the person is guilty or innocent. Now, this jury must represent kind of a fair summary of the people in the community. So you can't pick people who are all very, very wealthy to be in a jury, or really, really poor in a jury, or you can't pick one ethnic group only. It has to be a fair summary or a fair amount of everyone. It also has to be impartial, meaning they can't have these already preconceived opinions. And this comic is actually really going to show that. It's showing something that probably happened when you guys were either not born yet, and depending on what year you're watching this video anyways. The accused here is a gentleman by the name of Michael Vick, and he was accused of being a part of dog fights, a pretty serious crime that happened back in the early 2000s. And his jury here is a bunch of dogs. So as you can see, not a very impartial jury for his crime. Lastly, the accused is allowed to have a lawyer to assist them. Now, people can pay for their own lawyer, but if they don't have the money to do that, it is the government's responsibility to supply one. Now, usually this person who's supplied by the government gets paid through tax money. Talk about the Seventh Amendment. Again, I'm going to read through what the actual words say, so please follow along as I read it. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. All right, let's go through and once again kind of break down what the Seventh Amendment is all about. First off, you have to realize the Seventh Amendment is about non-criminal cases, otherwise known as civil cases. People have a right to have a jury decide these civil cases. Civil cases can be arguments over laws about money, property, or family matters for that matter. Now, the federal government definitely has to use or allow jury cases to be heard over civil matters. However, the states do not. States can have a judge decide upon civil cases. The use of the Seventh Amendment is slowly dying out, and there are three main reasons why this is happening. For the first reason, we have to look back why the founders originally decided to use or to put the Seventh Amendment into the Bill of Rights. Now, the original thought they had in mind was to protect people, because before the Revolution started, American colonists were not protected from harsh British taxes. So this is a way to protect people from harsh taxes or just anything that seemed to be out of their control that wasn't necessarily criminal. The second reason why this amendment is dying out is because the disputes people have over money, property, and family matters are becoming too complex for the average juror or average citizen to figure out. We're delving into laws here that just are over people's heads, especially if you're dealing with arguments between two big companies, or maybe a very wealthy family that's getting a divorce, trying to decide who gets what portion of the estate. And the last part is, it just takes way too long to pick the jurors. You have two groups who are in a very heated disagreement with each other, and they want to pick jurors who they feel aren't going to help the other side they're mad at. So it's just quicker to have a judge hear the case who's an expert in all parts of our law. Because again, remember, one of our rights is to have a speedy trial. Finally, let's talk about the Eighth Amendment. And I'm going to read it for you guys. It says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Amendment, and maybe you've seen this, is all about pre- and post-trial issues. It's to stop the government from giving overly harsh punishments for crimes, or from setting the price for getting released from jail too high before a trial starts anyways. Originally, the Eighth Amendment was put in because of these items that the framers had in the back of their minds. First off, they did not want to allow governments to use torture to get confessions because, this would happen back in the day, and they didn't want the American government to be able to use that. Secondly, they wanted to stop overtly physical acts from being used to oppress citizens. They didn't want the government to be able to do things to the citizens that were physically demeaning or physically painful to force them to follow their laws and rules. They wanted the government to rely on the courts to ensure that people would follow the law. So we come to a really big question, because in the Eighth Amendment, and let me go back to it, it says we cannot have cruel or unusual punishments as negative consequences. So who decides whether something is cruel or unusual? The answer may not be as easily defined as we would like to think. For example, are things considered cruel and unusual that were considered cruel and unusual also in 1791? And I chose this number because that's when the Bill of Rights were first created. So are those items to be what we consider cruel and unusual? Or should we look at more modern examples of what's considered cruel and unusual punishment? Or do we let the courts and public opinion decide? I'm going to post this question on Edmodo, and it's going to be for extra credit. So please give me your thoughts on that before you continue with the next slide, because the next slide may kind of taint your opinion. The words cruel and unusual can be interpreted as meaning punishments are cruel when you compare them to more traditional punishments. This comic over here I found online is a very good example of that. Throwing someone into the pit of death is pretty cruel when you compare it to more traditional punishments like solitary confinement, jail, maybe having people pick up litter to do a community service. We can also answer the question from the previous slide by looking at how the Eighth Amendment is used nowadays. For example, if a punishment is used over a long period of time, then we can consider it just and appropriate, as opposed to cruel and unusual, like solitary confinement, for example. That's been used for a very long time. So we shouldn't consider that cruel or unusual. If a punishment's not used anymore, then we should get rid of it, such as whipping people. That's not done. So why should we keep something like that around? Finally, the punishment needs to fit the crime. Again, this comic is a great example of that. If you step on a slug, you shouldn't go to the pit of death. If you steal a candy bar from, the local store, yeah, that's bad. You should get fined and maybe have some community service, but you shouldn't have like life in prison for that. Thank you for watching this flip video. The questions will be on Edmodo. Please make sure you fill out your outline, and I'll see you in class tomorrow. Mr. Mint, what are you doing here again? Mr. Volkman, I have it under good authority you've been eating M&Ms. Yeah, I love M&Ms. That's not good. 20 years hard labor for you! Ha ha ha! But, Mr. Mint, whoa! Hey, Mr. Mint, pick up this axe, Mr. Volkman. 20 years hard labor for eating M&Ms. Hey, but that goes against one of my rights, I'm sure. Maybe.